So stimulated by this story, wild vervet monkeys wreak havoc in Kenya. I just had to go out and find out whether little creatures like this really can throw stones and hurt people. Because in the story, well, there was a bunch of other stuff about these monkeys sexually harassing the women in this village and causing these poor farmers to be dependent on famine relief to survive, and even doing all sorts of sexual harassment, making sexually explicit gestures and so forth, and going so far as to destroy scarecrows, although the scarecrow doesn't look particularly destroyed to me. It looks a lot like some of the scarecrows I've seen before, but anyway, it's an allegedly destroyed scarecrow. The thing that intrigued me was this statement, that the bolder ones, monkeys that is, throw stones and chase the women from their farms. So I had always understood that monkeys could not throw effectively, and that it was one of the distinctions between humans and other primates is that humans could throw accurately and in a way that could harm their prey. And so I decided to go out and check out the scientific research on the subject. One of the interesting things is that already, if you Google, "can monkeys throw stones?" the story that I just was looking at about the village in Africa dominates the internet. So that tells you a little something about how quickly an idea like this will spread around. So if somebody were looking to see if monkeys can throw stones and accepted that story as accurate, then they would have a lot of verification, all of which are simply copies of one story. So here's a specific scientific study that was done by Westergaard and Suomi, in which capuchin monkeys threw stones at a stationary target located outside of their home cages, and that they could discriminate between stationary targets and moving targets, which is, according to some people, the essence of being able to hunt by throwing stones. So specifically, capuchin monkeys, according to this study, have throwing capabilities which are thought to be associated with the evolution of hominids, our ancestors. So here's the study if you want to go out and find it. I decided not to buy it, $32. Now, as to the ancillary question of how aggressive monkeys can be, I've heard a lot of stories about monkeys being aggressive. Here's a story by Antonio Sanchez in Boots and All. And essentially, Antonio reports that the monkeys in the area that they were going to essentially got very aggressive and attacked them and took their food away, or at least the food of one of the members of their party, even though some of the monkeys were innocently engaged in that sort of activity. This led me off to Derek Bounds for some reason, just looking at the evolution of the primate mind. And I'm just throwing this in as a place to go and have a look, kind of ancillary to this throwing question, but interesting. And then right here to YouTube, this answers the question of whether monkeys can throw. So somebody set up Freestar Media set up a contest between people here representing Social Security and a monkey representing investments throwing a ball, effectively a dart, to see who could come up with the best investment results. And the monkey, of course, won. What's interesting for the purpose of this throwing question is, what does it look like when the monkey throws? So here you see the monkey's elbow is appropriately articulated. Hasn't done much rotation of the shoulders, but it's certainly holding the ball in a throwing position. And here it is, the ball is about to be released. And then watch this. I'll go back and forth. The monkey throws the ball. And you see where the ball lands, right there. We'll go back and forth again. Notice that the shoulders of the monkey actually rotate in this direction, very much like a human being throwing. So no question in my mind now that a monkey can throw. Now whether the monkey can throw hard enough to hurt you is an interesting question, but it does look like the ball's getting there pretty fast. So some other studies that have been done include this one by Westergaard, Kuhn, Babbitts, and Suomi, about aimed throwing not for the purpose of striking somebody or hurting someone, but for the purpose of exchanging food. And by putting some monkeys close to each other, but far enough apart that they couldn't reach to each other with the food, it was observed that the monkeys would throw food to each other. Again, this is all tufted capuchin monkeys. And I believe that monkey in the Social Security gag there was one of the same kind. So I guess these are well known as throwing monkeys. And that they're even very specific about kinds of stones, the weight of the stones that they would choose. The females throw heavier stones than the males, which is interesting. And they throw more accurately if they get to use the stones that they like rather than stones that they don't. Or as they say, preferred mass versus non-preferred mass. And then the question of the significance of all this stone throwing. So here, William Calvin, University of Washington, has written a book called The Throwing Madonna, Essays on the Brain, in which he explores the idea that throwing was actually the source or the activity that set the evolutionary groundwork for our bigger brains. So I thought I would intersperse here somebody with a big brain. That's my son Galen. And then somebody with a significantly less big brain. That's me, but reasonably similar to the monkey's throw, except I was throwing sidearm here because I'm skipping a stone, as you see right here. And there. You can see the result of that throw. So whether that led to me having a bigger brain afterward or not, I'm not sure. I didn't feel particularly smarter after all that throwing. But according to Calvin, it probably all started with the invention of one-arm rock throwing, handy for hunting prey without the usual long chase scene. And his point is that it is detailed, accurate muscle sequencing. I think he states that it's you have to be accurate to 1/1600th of a second in terms of the release of a thrown object in order to hit something that's 20 yards away. And given the accuracy of the muscle sequencing that's required and the perfect timing, that could result in strong selective pressure to have one part of the brain responsible for sequencing get bigger. And here's what that detailed sequencing looks like at the top of the throwing world. Although I suppose folks who bowl and cricket might say that they're at the top of the throwing world, but here we are in American baseball looking at this throwing action here. And as you see, it's very sophisticated what's going on, not only with the throwing arm, the shoulder, the entire rotation of the body, but even the counterweight of the left arm there. And then here's a story from a Marine, a U.S. Marine, talking about being in Subic Bay, the Philippines, in 1972. And his gunnery sergeant fools him into throwing rocks at some monkeys that were nearby in a dumpster. Actually, one monkey. And the monkeys, he said, came out, teeth bared, followed by a counterattack. And this was what was interesting. He came running toward me, throwing rocks at the cyclic rate. And that they were accurate and it hurt. So I figure a Marine would know if he'd had monkeys throw rocks at him. So that one seems to be fairly compelling. Some older stories here in the Evolution of Culture and other essays. We have this story about monkeys in the Lake Chad region, and that they pelted the people if they approached within a certain distance. So some evidence of throwing there. And then this one was particularly interesting. Thirsty monkeys stone a Kenyan watering cattle. Now, as I read this, I mean, there was something about it that these monkeys stoned to death a herder watering his livestock. but that attempts to confirm the story were unsuccessful. So stories like this, you always have to be a little bit concerned that maybe some people did the killing in question and decided to blame it on thirsty monkeys. And then in The Play of Man by Carl Groos, talks about knowing a monkey who could throw things with great force and precision, but this was a two-handed throw, not a one-handed throw. So I guess after these researches, I still have a question mark here as to whether monkeys can throw hard enough to hurt people and harass them. It certainly seems like they might be able to. There are accounts out there, but not a totally resolved question in my head.